right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Backpack to Briefcase on overcoming imposter syndrome. We are pleased to welcome USU alum and faculty member Paul Fjeldsted. My name is Elise Newberry, and I'm a career specialist here in the Huntsman School of Business. We've created the Backpack to Briefcase series as a way to talk about all things career preparation. I'm going to quickly introduce Paul and then let him take away the time he needs to address this important topic for our students. For those of you who are watching live, please leave your comments and questions in the chat as we can see them, and we will address them throughout the show. So Paul Fjeldsted is a senior lecturer in the Econ and Finance Department at the Huntsman School of Business. He graduated from Utah State University with a bachelor's degree in liberal arts and in 1986 and from Harvard Business School in 1990. Paul joined the Huntsman School in 2008 after retiring as a managing director at Citigroup Global Markets, Inc., where he was responsible for structuring and trading credit derivatives on the emerging markets of Central and South America. Today, he serves as a faculty member as well as a mentor for many of our Huntsman students. Welcome, Paul.
Great. Thank you, Elise. Thanks for the opportunity. I thought this would be kind of a fun presentation. I was telling Elise before that I feel like I'm not that qualified to talk about imposter syndrome, which I guess is ironic, giving a presentation on it. But I do have my own experience with it. So I'm hoping that what I have to share is helpful to you. I'll just go through like a quick little bit more background, talk about like kind of a definition of imposter syndrome, some personal stories about it, some campus, kind of more students examples of it, and then at least my own experience, like kind of how to grapple with it or how to deal with it. So this is the definition, and then I'll go into my little story a little bit. Persistent doubt concerning one's abilities or accomplishments accompanied by the fear of being exposed as a fraud, despite evidence of one's ongoing success. So that phrase, being exposed as a fraud, I think really kind of hits the nail on the head when it comes to imposter syndrome. There's always this fear that people think that you're, more accomplished than you think you are, and I guess one condition, which is a little hopeful, is that in order to actually have imposter syndrome, you have to be successful. Okay, like being successful is actually a precondition to having it. So I guess that in a sense is a little bit comforting. So about me, so I am from Logan, went to Logan High School, Utah State. Like Elise said, I was a liberal arts major. Really had no particular focus on a particular career coming out of undergrad. So I kind of defaulted into business because I didn't think I could be a doctor. Actually, didn't have I hated like those classes, and I tried law and I just didn't like it. So I defaulted really to business. So met my wife here at Utah State. We both graduated at the same time, and she was an English major. I was a liberal arts major. So in my first job that I got was actually at a bank in New York City. So we moved to New York. So a month after we graduated, and I was pretty much like, I was pretty nervous about like leaving. First of all, leaving Utah. Secondly, like moving to a place like New York City, and kind of having to, I guess, see if I could be successful with this group of people who I'd never met. So just to give you a sense, okay, this is Grand Central Terminal in New York City. This is one of the main commuting terminals. I put up this slide just to give you a sense, okay, because this is kind of what you walk into, and I was pretty intimidated. This is the building here on the left is the building that I worked in. This is Park Avenue, and it's like a 30-story building, and there's just tons of these huge buildings around, tons of people. It's a totally different environment than the one I was used to. My wife also got a job in public relations in New York, and so she was on Park Avenue as well. We walked to work. together at the beginning. And, we were both pretty intimidated and pretty nervous, right, about whether we'd be successful in this type of environment. At one point, I think about 3 months in, we just kind of had this conversation about it. And we expressed to each other that, like, at some point, okay, someone was going to tell us that we were totally incompetent. They couldn't believe how we managed to sneak into these positions that we were in. And, it was only a matter of time before, they'd have to fire us because we didn't know what we were doing. Right. So we that was actually a relief to be able to just talk to someone about it, like, okay, like, at any moment, right, we're going to get found out. And I think that was one thing I guess I didn't realize that other people had, and my wife did. And as we talked to other people that we knew there, really everyone felt the same way. And it was amazing, right? Like, we were all kind of early career, just starting our careers. And we all of our kind of group of friends that we met in New York, we all felt like almost the same way. So the first thing I guess I would mention about all this is it is very normal. It's very it's very common, right, to feel this way. And I think in my experience, it kind of kicks in anytime there's kind of a transition into something new. So when I left New York and we moved to Boston for business school, I was freaking out about that too. Like, there was this group of people I'd never met, like a bunch of really smart people. Like, would I even pass? Would I, make it through? Would I be successful? That transition was difficult. When I went back after business school, went back to New York actually, and eventually transitioned to a trading role with Salomon Brothers, I also felt the same feeling, like, oh, not sure I can be successful with this. So seems to kick in transitions. I think when you're entering college, that's definitely a vulnerable time for this. You'll see as you go through college, you get kind of a little more comfortable with it. But any kind of like internship or certainly like a full-time job, when you start it, you always feel this way. And it's like, it's totally fine. It's like, that's kind of a very normal and natural response. So next thing I wanted to bring up is this picture of this duck. So there's a couple of kind of common like memes about this kind of on college campuses. One of them is the Stanford Duck. Okay, so you could Google this, like Stanford Duck syndrome is called. And the idea is that, you have a duck like swimming like placidly across the water, right? And it looks like it's effortless, right? Like the duck is just, is almost like automatically just like gliding across the water. But underneath it, those legs are just kicking like crazy, right? And there's a similar one with Penn, actually University of Pennsylvania, called Penn Face, right? Which is you kind of have this happy, like calm, relaxed face all the time, but beneath that, you're like freaking out, right? Because you're in a very challenging academic environment. And I think sometimes we can perpetuate these problems ourselves just by like trying to appear to be like that everything's under control and everything's fine. Or maybe we look around at other people who kind of appear that way, and we think, oh, how could we possibly like get to the point where it's so easy? Like it looks so easy. But I think what this really tells you, because these are actually syndromes, okay, and they're very kind of widely understood at these schools, and I'm sure other schools. I'm sure we have our own like form of it here. That it is very common. Okay, it's like, you do have to work pretty hard. Okay, you don't have to appear that you're not. Okay, like it's okay to talk to people and express concerns or feelings about it. Like I think the big thing to me is just shining a light on it and making it a little transparent, because this is very difficult. It is, it does take a ton of effort, okay, to be successful. And you don't have to add on this additional burden of making it look really easy. Like, what's the point of that? Okay, so let's move on. The next thing was, I think, a really interesting point, and this is something that I was talking to my wife, who is a therapist, about it, and this, I think, a really interesting point. Like, imposter syndrome makes us think that we have to choose between failure or regret, right? That either we will regret not trying, or if we do try, we will fail. Okay, which makes no sense, right? I think we have like like, this is the interesting thing about this whole, I guess, mental frame, is that it's a false reality. Okay, like, in reality, you're much better than you think you are. Okay, you will fail every once in a while, of course, in life, but you might succeed much more than you expect you will. And I think imposter syndrome tries to talk us into not trying or not making an effort, which that's really the tragedy in my mind, because it's this false, it's our own reality, which we created, but it's a completely false narrative about the way life is and the way we are individually. So we can ignore a lot of these feelings, I think, and just, go for stuff and not worry about how we look or whether we'll be successful. We're probably much more prepared than we think we are. All right, and then we'll just go to this is kind of my last slide, actually, and I'll talk about some other experiences. But I love about this slide is the mirage, right? Like, it looks like the road is vanishing out into the future. And of course it's not, right? As you keep going down the road, then the road kind of reappears, and you can see that you still have a path forward. And I think of imposter syndrome as kind of a mirage. It's like this false barrier. It makes us look like there's no way forward, but in reality, there's no problem, right? Moving forward with it. So now, in terms of, I guess, my own experience with it with students, this kind of manifests itself in a couple different ways. And one way I've noticed is a specific example is probably just, applying for jobs. Like, I kind of basically tell students they should just apply for everything. Like, why not? Like, what's the downside? And like, anything that looks interesting, right? And there are some really interesting surveys about people applying for jobs, whether they're 50% qualified or 100% qualified. And I think it's important to note, for students who may not know this, that recruiters are not expecting that the only people who apply are those who fit 100% of the qualifications. Job qualification for a job is actually like a wish list, right? It's like, oh, this would be nice, right? I'd love to have this. I'd love to have this. Like, I'd love to have like all of these things. Okay. But in reality, I know I'm not going to get all of that, and it's fine, right? I'm just trying to get as strong a pool as I can to choose from. And once I have that pool, then I'll make the decision whether to hire or not on qualitative measurement, more like qualitative factors like personality or fit or whatever, right? So sometimes students, like, they don't apply for something because they're not 100%, so they don't fit 100% of the qualifications. I think the smart students, the ones who are really thinking about it and are strategic, they'll apply if they're like hit like 50%. Okay, like, it doesn't bother them to go for stuff that that they think would be really good and helpful for them if they only hit like less than 100% of the qualifications. And the tragic thing to me is that there's some really great students at Utah State who fit like 60, 70, 80% of the qualifications, but don't apply just because they don't hit 100%, right? And so they don't make it into that next threshold, into the pool where they can be evaluated based on other factors like their personality or fit or work ethic or other things, right? That they also might be like really good at. So yeah, I would encourage, I guess, students to just go ahead and apply for pretty much everything that looks interesting. Like, there's literally no downside. It's sending a resume or a cover letter. You might be surprised, right? Worst case is, okay, you don't get that position. That's fine, right? That there's no downside in trying ever. And there's only upside in going for pretty much anything that looks interesting to you. Just the other thing, the other, the last thing I'll bring out is just some examples. I mean, I just see this over and over and over, and I think it's understandable. And it makes total sense the students would feel the way they do. And, I felt that way. Okay. I think anyone you talk to, at whatever level of life, wherever they are in life, if they're being honest with you, they'll tell you that they feel this way sometimes. So it's completely understandable. But I guess I would just, for a couple of examples, I want to use full names because I haven't actually talked to anybody and got their permission to talk about any of these. But just from people I've met, a student who graduated in 2018 in economics, and she had a strong interest in finance. But Lynn, when I met with her, she actually said to me, like, yeah, imposter syndrome is really kicking in right now. Like, I have a really hard time moving forward in the interview process. And she was almost ready to pull herself out of the interview process just because she felt like she wasn't going to be successful. Which is, if you think about that for a second, like kind of pulling yourself out of the race before it even begins, just because you don't think you're going to finish. And she's of course this great student, okay, right? Like really smart, like from my perspective, really capable. But she kind of pushed through that and ended up being like really successful in her career. She's actually now in New York City working for a fintech firm. If she wouldn't have pushed through this, she wouldn't be where she is today. So I think that's a really interesting example. Another one was a student who was, she graduated in 2020, and she was a pretty quiet student, but always got like pretty good grades in my classes. And I would keep like sending her stuff like, hey, you should apply for this, you should apply for that. And she'd be like, well, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a good fit, but I think in her mind, it was more about, she didn't fit the qualifications. At least she didn't think that she did. And I was in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's okay. Like, you don't have to fit all of them. Just go ahead and apply. Like, it's going to be fine. But anyway, she got closer to graduation. And I think that kind of gave her a little more incentive to kind of like, just go ahead and try stuff. So she kind of on a whim, she applies for Brex and ended up getting like a full-time offer from them. And they really liked her, right? Like, those her personality, they liked her academic performance, and she's a really kind person and a great manager, right? So I think sometimes we don't appreciate our own strengths. Like, it takes other people to tell us or to see the strengths in us. We have a strong tendency, I think, to underplay our own abilities or play them down. And we don't necessarily see the potential in ourselves. And so I think with all of this, like, talking to people you trust, and trusting what they say about you. Like in this particular situation, I think other people have a much better read on who we are from a professional perspective than we might have ourselves. So we might think we know ourselves really well, but in this particular situation, we may not actually. We may not have a very good read on who we are. So talking to others who see a lot of students, there are lots of these at the Huntsman School. Some fantastic faculty and staff and mentors, career coaches, and so forth. They see a lot of students, and I think if they tell you that you can be successful in something, that's a pretty good sign. Like, that ought to give you like a lot of confidence that you can succeed in what you're trying to do. Last one. This is another student actually coming out of high school, had a really low like ACT score, and just not good at taking tests. Okay, but he wanted to go into a career that really demanded like very, very strong like academic performance. So I mean, he applied himself. He did great in his classes, but he's had this lagging, this feeling that he wasn't going to be able to succeed because of this, right? And but what I admired about him is he just kept at it. Like he didn't give up. He applied for internships that kind of became increasingly like selective and difficult, and ended up getting a fantastic placement coming out of Utah State. And this is just this last year. But I mean, there are like more and more examples of this I see all the time, of USU students, and they're competing for positions that are historically been more like in the realm of like Ivy League schools or students from really big schools. And I think we've got to own a little bit that Utah State students can compete with pretty much anybody. And I think the barriers are more like artificial. Like one of them is imposter syndrome, I think, or this feeling that we couldn't succeed outside of our little pond, right? But the fact is, and I see this over and over, and I'm hoping that really the school continues to like show this vision to students, which I think it will, that you can succeed like anywhere, okay, and not just geographically, but like in any industry that you really have interest in and want to pursue, or any company or nonprofit or whatever it is, whatever that kind of big goal is. There's no reason why you couldn't pursue it if you keep at it and be successful with it. So that's basically my presentation. I hope it's helpful, and I'll open it back up, I guess, to Elise if you have anything, or if anyone else has anything.
Yeah, Paul, that was really great. I loved how you talked about this really pops up in moments of transition. So it's not even just those first few semesters of students coming into college, but it's also when they're graduating or when they're looking at internships, maybe even in their second professional role, when they might not utilize as many university supports. So I really like that you highlighted that. And one thing that we hear from employers all the time is that our students are on an extremely high caliber in terms of talent, but they're also super humble, which I think can play into that challenge, right? We don't want to necessarily talk ourselves too high and then feel that, well, now I have to live up to it feeling. So we do have a couple of questions that we've prepared. And one of them is specifically for our incoming and new students who may be just starting at the Huntsman School. So with so many amazing and talented students here at the school, how can they start believing that they belong among their peers and colleagues?
Yeah. Yeah, I felt this way completely, like going into business school. And so I think it's kind of the same basic like mentality, right? I remember my section in business school, there are 90 students, right? And the way it worked is you were in the same 90 student group the entire first year. So you'd stay in the same classroom, the same seat the entire year. And the professors would come in and out of the classroom, right? Like you didn't actually change classrooms. So you had the same group of people all the time. And grades were 50% class participation. So you had to like participate on a regular basis, right? And there were just some students who were great at participating. I was horrible, okay, a very introverted person. And I just, I was freaking out because I'd have to participate, right? And really at one point I got together with the other, like we put together a little study group to get through, which is common. And the study group, this 3 or 4 of us in this section, we were all feeling the same way. We all felt like we were going to like fail out. And there was a forced curve. So you had like a 10% of the class was going to fail. Okay. But I think what you miss is that, if you're there, you belong. Okay. Like if you got admitted, okay, like the school is very good at admitting people who will succeed. Okay. And in really investing in students so that they will succeed. So if you're here, okay, then the school is going to invest in your success. Okay. You don't need to feel like you're ever alone in that. There's so many faculty here, and like I mentioned, like you and Nate, right, and the other career coaches, and so many people who are kind of invested in student success. Like the only danger really is the students think that they have to do it themselves, right, or that they're on their own, and that they can't talk about it, right, or they can't like they don't have anybody to go to. That's like the only danger with that mentality. Because it's pretty easy, I think, to get in your own world, and like think that I'm the only one that's struggling. Okay. It's just not the case. Okay. Like everyone else is feeling the same way you are. So opening up about it and talking about it, I think, is a huge benefit, is a real reason, is a good like tool to use like really throughout life, right? Not just in this situation.
Yeah. So we had a question from Leanne Wappett, who's another faculty member here. How do you advise students to accept good enough because they've done it, or versus never doing anything because it's not perfect? So that regret versus failure dichotomy.
I was raised to kind of be a perfectionist myself. Okay. Like, and it's a hard lesson to learn for me. Like that perfectionism is a burden. It's not good. It's not a good thing. It's not a quality that we should be pursuing because it's not realistic. It's not, in my view. Okay. It's actually like a negative thing. Okay. Like itself, like that thought that we can be perfect in any particular aspect. Okay. Because at the end of the day, we're flawed individuals, like everyone is. Okay. And that's fine. Like we can own that we are flawed. Okay. And it's more about just doing our best with our tools and our constraints. Right. So I think we need to be a little easier on ourselves in terms of like, okay, where was your heart? Did you do your best? And if you feel good about it, then you're fine. Okay. You don't have to feel like, oh, I could have been in like 20 more hours on this project and then I would, right. Like at some point it just doesn't make any sense. Right. And so, it's okay to not be, in fact, I think it's harmful to think that you have to be perfect. Okay. I think to me, that's a horrible mindset. It really is. It's a barrier to progress. So I think consciously, like trying to like get rid of it is probably really helpful thing in my view. That's just my own experience.
Yeah, that's great. So it's spring semester. We've got so many students coming up on graduation who are looking for the right fit. We hear all the time that it is the candidates market right now. But for our graduating students, what are some ways to differentiate between imposter syndrome and having a workplace just not be the right fit for that?
I don't think you can know. I don't think you should expect that you would know this. That's why I think you just apply broadly, okay? And hopefully you get several options. In this market, there's a good chance you will get several options. And then I think it comes down to the people that you met. And did you like them? Could you get along with them, right? Like you hear this all the time that your manager has the biggest impact on whether you're happy in your job, your direct manager or the people you work with, right? So I think it's more about generating hopefully more than one option so that you can compare, and then focusing in on the people, like which one makes you feel the most comfortable, which one do you think would be the the most, the easiest to work with, and the one you learn the most from, or maybe they challenge you the most, or maybe, make you feel the most comfortable in your job. So I don't know. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Having a fit for a work environment can be so indescriptive, right? So I think that provides a lot of guidance. Okay. Last question for us. Are there any resources, books, podcasts, news articles, anything that you recommend for students and professionals, especially new professionals, that may be dealing with imposter syndrome or are interested in learning more about it?
My favorites are Mindset by Carol Dweck. I think it's a fantastic resource, and pretty much anything by Brene Brown is really good too. So I think any of her podcast books, anything from her, I think is amazing. So those are my two favorites.
Amazing. I personally love Brene Brown as well. I listen to her podcast almost every week, so definitely a fan. Well, thank you so much for your time, Paul. We really appreciate it. For those that are watching, a couple of reminders. Next week, January 21st, we are talking with Steve Wilcox at the Walt Disney Company about organizing your job search. So it can be overwhelming wanting to apply everywhere just to see what's out there and to take your chances, as Paul suggested today. So let's organize it. So we've got that coming up next week. Same time, same place, 9 a.m., YouTube. And then starting in February, we're switching things up this year, and we are going to be hosting a Spring Career Expo on February 4th. And registration is open for both our virtual session as well as our in-person session. Once again, thank you, Paul, for joining us today and talking about this important topic that honestly needs to be talked more about. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.